Back in. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members with Podcast Movement. I'm really excited today. We have our session, How to Use Private Podcasts to Monetize Your Audience. We have Lindsay and Nora with Hello Audio. Hello, ladies. The lazy podcast question, of course, is would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your background, what you're working on, so that way those that don't know can be in the know. So why don't we go alphabetical? Let's start with, or we can start with Nora. If Nora's like, hey, what about me?
Oh, no,
Either one of you. Yeah,
I
who
like
wants to go first?
alphabetical, and I'm usually last.
No, go for it,
But
Nora.
no, it's good. My name is Nora Sutton. I am one of the co-founders at Hello Audio, along with Lindsay and Derek, who is not here. But I'm sure if you are hanging out around us or in our community, you will definitely meet Derek, or in support, you'll see him there too. I actually came from corporate as my background, and I am loving everything to do with private podcasts, which you're going to hear about here. My background's in marketing, mostly revenue optimization, both top line and bottom line. So, top line marketing, I've helped sell over $500 million of stuff online. And on the bottom line optimization, I'm systems that scale. Is typically where you'll see me doing stuff. But today's all about audio. So I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay.
Audio while we're on video here.
Yes.
Just kidding. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Padilla, CEO of Hello Audio, co-founder. And a little bit about me. I did have a podcast a couple years ago called Academics Mean Business. I used to work as a professor in a community college. So one of the first things I wanted to do when I started my own kind of creator business was to talk to other professors who were like leaving the academy, because I left it, but I wasn't leaving it to escape at that time. I probably would have if what was happening in the last couple of years was happening. But I loved my job. And so I like to say that I accidentally started a business and I was helping a bunch of creators actually create courses online. So I have a big background in creating good content, meaningful content that gets results. And it was in that journey that I realized that people were hiring me because their students weren't finishing their courses. And part of me was like, well, I can help with lesson planning, but I can't really get them to sign in. So that led me to work on Hello Audio, where I was like, why can't I just listen to this? So you guys as podcasters, we're obviously preaching to the choir when it comes to understanding the power of audio, but we're really here today to talk about private podcasting specifically. And we're going to probably present to you some unique ideas that are not the typical charge $5 a month for an ad-free show, or maybe for extra interviews. We have other ideas of how you can use private podcasting, and that's what we wanted to share with you guys today. So all that being said, I'm going to dive in. There we go. Oh, wow, this looks nice. Okay, so I am using Canva here. This was the easiest way for me to share without having a double monitor. And so you can see at the top, it's just the side window that I'm sharing. Just letting you know that that's how that's rolling. Okay, cool. So like I said at Open, audio is truly the next landscape of attention. Nora and I believe that. You guys all know that. And the reality is, audio really hasn't changed in the last 15 years. But in the last 1 or 2 years, right, 2020 heading into 2021, we started to realize how powerful audio was, and that there was more that we could do with it. And so a lot of what folks were saying is this is kind of the next landscape of attention. We've gone really far with video, but we haven't with audio. And so at Hello Audio, we operate that is, what is happening kind of right now is that audio is having a new, what's the word, resurgence, renaissance, I've heard people call it. And, you guys have been a part of that for a while. So now it's where are we taking it, right? Purpose of the chat today, walk away with ideas for adding private pods to your marketing plan and income goals. And as you learn from Nora's background, she can definitely help you with ideas for monetization and income related to growing your podcast and possibly building a business, a side hustle off of that podcast. So our agenda, talking about why audio. Again, I'm not going to dive too much into it. We're going to revisit it actually after I share some of the stuff of the feeds that you can create. And then we'll also show you some tools that make it really easy to create private podcasts. We already did these intros, so I think I'm just going to skip over it really fast. I'm Lindsay, and that's
I'm
Nora.
Nora.
And we did our background, so that's cool. So what I wanted to kind of lead with is this idea that the audio industry as we know it is changing a little bit. There was this app called Clubhouse that came out in March of 2020 was when it first dropped. I got on, I think, in November of 2020. And I've definitely been watching what has happened recently with it. And what has really been happening is everyone's diving in, right? I think LinkedIn just launched their audio rooms like last week, right? So we have this idea of social audio that people want to actually just listen to each other. They don't need to get on video. That video causes more problems than we maybe need. And then there's this idea of premium podcast. And this is where private podcasting fits in. And Spotify and Apple both released premium podcasts recently, where you can basically have your listeners sign up for a monthly fee, and you can provide other types of content. And so I wanted to kind of talk about those two things because those were some of the most recent updates in the audio world. And then premium podcasts really are private podcasts where you're paying for access, right, Nora? I'm not missing anything on that.
No. And I mean, Patreon kind of does this. So there's other players in the game.
Oh yeah, Patreon
but
too, yeah.
typically what you're seeing is that you're kind of stuck in this monthly subscription model is typically how these things work. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's what we're excited to talk to you about.
Yeah. So when we talk about private podcasts, a lot of people are, my guess is people like you in the podcasting industry know what it is. We also technically share about private podcasting with people who aren't podcasters yet. And so typically we have to explain what it is. But for you guys, we're going to kind of take the basic assumption that you have an understanding. There we go. I was going to say idea of understanding of what a private podcast is. But essentially it's gated content where someone has a unique feed. And when I sign up in whatever way that looks like for access to that feed gets delivered to me and I can open it in certain podcast players, the ones that allow you to play private podcasts. That's basically it, right? But what Nora and I want to talk about is like what's possible with private podcasts. Like where have we not taken them yet? Or where are we, our users at Hello Audio are starting to take it? And what's possible that is outside of this pay $5 a month model, which is cool and it can work for some folks. You have to have high conversion rates. You have to have a big audience. There's lots of reasons why it's really hard. Low ticket, $5. It's hard to live off of $5 a month unless you have a huge audience. And so I think there are some folks who are kind of sitting here going, oh, maybe it's not that useful for me. But what Nora and I want to show you is that there's other things you can do with it. And that's our goal today. Cool. I have this slide because as a teacher, like, here's how I want you to interact with this presentation today. This is not a like, okay, click here, go here, do this. Like, it's not a very how-to type of presentation. In fact, it's more of like a brainstorming, get your creative ideas going for your personal podcast and the business that you potentially want to build off the back of it, right? And so it's not about writing down what I put on the slides. Like you're going to see there's actually like when I talk about the 5, it just is going to be a number with the thing. You need to write down ideas that pop into your head as Nora and I are talking. That's what this is for. And that's how you can best engage, right? So it's really about paying attention to not what is written technically on the slide, but actually what's going on in your head as a response to what you're learning. And I've had people say, after hearing some of these ideas, oh my God, I wrote down so many things that I can do with this. That's what I want you to do. I want you to walk away with a ton of ideas and get those creative juices going. That's the type of presentation this is. This isn't a how-to. So hopefully that frees you up a little bit to not like worry about missing something. And it's more about you being in tune with your business. Yeah. And then we're here for questions. So as a question comes up, would this work for me? Or what if my thing looks like this? Or what if I serve this audience? We can totally help with that. So that engagement is helpful too. Okay. So we're going to talk about 5 feeds that you can create. And then, of course, I have a bonus one for you. I think, Nora, do you want to kind of kick us off with the first one?
Sure. Oh, love this. So let's talk about attracting with audio. So everyone knows kind of what a lead magnet is. It's usually something of value that you're exchanging for someone else's email address. And I'm sure you know, I don't have to tell you as podcasters, getting their email address is going to be critical to monetizing anything on the back end. You need to know who you're talking to, you need to know who's listening, and having that email address is key. Well, the cool thing about private podcasts is that you can offer a private podcast in exchange for their email address. A private podcast can be the perfect lead magnet. And because it's tied to their specific email address, their feed access, right, is tied to that email address. Now you know exactly which emails, which individuals, the individual listeners are listening. And you can, well, we'll talk about what you can do because of that. You can take actions. There's lots of stuff you can do. But on the front end, now this gives you more flexibility as to what it can be. So we've had clients that were using great PDFs, audio, or, ebooks as downloads and things like that. They had maybe a 20% conversion rate offering that as a lead magnet. They switched it to audio as a private feed. The perceived value is really high. And all of a sudden their conversion skyrocketed to over 80% of people that were wanting to opt in for their lead magnets. You can provide coaching sessions so people kind of get a feel for what you're all about. We've had people, if you're using webinars or videos as launch content, all with turning it into a private podcast, you are making it easy to reach them. You are unlocking all of the hours of the day that we are not sitting here at this screen, which is really, really cool. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use private podcasts as lead magnets. But let's face it, with your audience, you're meeting them where they're already at. And that is
I was just going to say, this is huge.
Channel.
We're talking to podcasters, right? So if you've created a PDF or you've tried to pitch a video series of videos and it's hard for you to get those folks to go over there, you're like, well, I have 1,000 downloads. I should at least get a couple people, right? What we're doing here is showing you that by offering something for free, you're getting people in your private podcast, in your public podcast, to raise their hand and say, I want to go even further with you, meaning I want to give you my email address. We all know that you guys actually are creating content for one of the best lead magnets out there. Public podcasts are great lead magnets, like the intimacy, the connection. We could talk, you guys all know that's why you do what you do, right? You are connecting with your audience in that way. So now it's another step in the customer journey where you're like, cool, you listen to my free stuff. I also have this other free thing, but it's going to do this for you. And you're like, oh, okay. And they're willing to give you that email address, which is a form of currency. So it has to be really valuable. And here's what's cool is with lead magnets, if you make a mini course or, there's lots of ideas we could go into this, but you basically are now creating a piece of content that's also shareable. So someone can be like, oh my gosh, this podcaster I listened to created this really great lead magnet on this topic. Now that person is sharing that and not just your public podcast, and you're growing your audience in a way that involves you actually having control over the folks who are engaging with you, which you do not have. Having a public podcast is shouting out into the ether. And you're like, cool. And then it's you have no idea who's listening to that. Right. And so this is taking it a step further. So when we talk about, we're, not here to talk about growing your audience from a public podcast perspective. We're talking about growing your audience, growing that relationship with the folks in your audience and helping them kind of take more action in your if you're building a business on the back end. Cool. Awesome. So, whoops, I forget, if I'm looking at it here. So, okay, I like this one. And this is, you could argue is another version of a lead magnet, but it's very specific because there's, a method to this process. It's not this generic lead magnet. So we started with the generic, but now I'm giving you an idea of growing that list again. And what's cool about summits. Now, many of you have probably been to a summit, maybe something on podcasting. Maybe you joined a summit on nutrition. Maybe you joined a summit on marketing your podcast, right? This is cool where you as a creator, you as a podcaster can connect and bring in a bunch of guest experts and have them talk about a different subject. And they basically are bringing their audience with them, right? Now you're all sharing and getting access to these folks, and they can learn about you. They can discover you. We know with discovery with public podcasts is really hard, right? So this is a great way to, share your audience with other folks. What I want to add is it doesn't have to be a video summit. And this is where I think, as somebody who's been to a summit and had every intention of watching every, interview, or maybe I just wanted like one or two of them, like two of the folks were like someone I wanted to really listen to. I just like never got around to like, first of all, it didn't work with my schedule, but then watching the replay. And we know with audio that it's way easier when you remove those barriers. And so by offering an audio version of this type of lead magnet and growing your list, you are actually providing, like Nora said, the ability for folks to consume the content that doesn't have to be sitting in front of a computer. As we all know, our listeners are walking their dogs, they're doing the dishes, they're driving to work. You can basically make that happen with Summit. So I want you to start thinking like, oh, shoot. I hope by this point in the presentation, you're like, I think I could do a lot of things with this. And partially the reason why you might not have thought of it is because of the availability of private podcasts, basically forcing you into membership model where you're paying per listener. And what we want you to do is take that model away and say, what could I do if it was just open? What if it was just another way of producing content? And so here we are, video podcast or video summits that can be turned into podcasts. Or maybe you've hosted a summit on your podcast, a public podcast. There are folks that have done that, right? Like a series of interviews, very similar. Turn that into a lead magnet. Don't bury it in your typical series where someone has to come across it. Pull it out because it was of value. And I think I'm now actually just coming up with a new one, right? There's a lot of podcasts. I'm preparing for a home birth. So I'm listening to something called Happy Home Birth. And she did a series on pain management. Big deal, right? When you're about to birth a baby. And I wish it was something that was pulled out of the regular 200 episode podcast so I don't have to dig and find it. She could be pulling in a whole bunch of home birth folks who really want to solve that problem. And yes, I want to listen to all the birth stories of all the women who are amazing and had home births, but like that's something that is like a skill I need, right? Pull that out. That is now a lead magnet when all it was already something you recorded. That's what's really cool about what we're sharing today is like, it's not even about creating new monthly content for this paid podcast. It is actually about finding the value in what you've already created and pulling it out so people can find it easier.
Yep.
I wasn't even expecting to teach that. That should have been like 2.5. And the reason is because I, was prepping this presentation yesterday and I was listening to a pain management episode on the way home from my hair appointment. And so I was like, oh, I wish I had all 5 of them in a row and I could just like have that be separate than her entire podcast. So I don't have to scroll down and find all of them. So anyways.
It's true. Well, and I'll say this, in full transparency, we've helped so many people figure out how to use audio for their businesses that yes, we're giving you 5 in a bonus and we'll maybe throw in some more. We have over 50 or 60 different ways that people are using it. And it just continues to grow because people are so creative about it. One thing to keep in mind here too, is that if you already do summits or events, we say free because it can be, you can also monetize the recordings. We have clients that have absolutely, all of your people they come to the summit, maybe it's a free registration, but if they want recordings, you have them pay for it. Most people nowadays don't trust themselves to watch those video recordings. So your conversions are lower than they used to be. By offering a private podcast, watch what happens to conversions. Every single one of our members that have done this have seen their conversions skyrocket because now people actually trust that they'll listen to these because they know they can listen to them on the go. So just keep that in mind too.
Good. Yeah, like even providing an archive. Some of you folks have probably been podcasting for years and you have hundreds and hundreds of episodes. I don't know if you know this, not all the episodes upload in every single podcast app. And so what you can do is actually pay for access to an archive. And maybe it is only $5, but you're getting somebody to commit by giving something and recognizing like, look, you put in a lot of effort. You're on episode 500. And so you could archive and give access to folks for stuff that's not really showing up in their public podcast. And so people will pay for that organizational convenience. Absolutely, I will pay for organizational convenience. When I have to go digging, I'm less likely to do it. And unfortunately, 500 episode podcast, that's a lot of digging. And if I could have it sorted by topic, you could do that with a private podcast. And now you know the topics that people are interested in if they're willing to raise their hand, right? So we went on a little tangent, but hopefully it's definitely valuable as a way to think about it for sure. Numero 3. Okay, so we're getting into some paid ideas. Again, flip-flop, can be free, can be paid. Nora, you want to take this one?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, challenges, boot camps, workshops, sprints, call them whatever you want to. These are really popular and they're doing really, really well, right? So, if you think about what you can do, a lot of times people shy away from running a challenge because they don't want the Facebook group, they don't want to manage everything. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be videos. It doesn't have to be done in video. You can create a workshop. You can create challenges with audio. You can have audio in a supplementary workbook. That has worked really, really well for folks. So, and the really cool thing, so we haven't really talked about how private podcasts work and why they're different. One of the reasons they're different is because with a private podcast, we get to control how that content is delivered. So in a conventional
one more time, because that's a big deal.
This is a huge deal. We get to control how your content is delivered. So let me explain why it's different. In a conventional public podcast, it's date driven. Every episode is released at the same time to all of your listeners, right? It's a broadcast. Here it is. And yes, you can do that on a private podcast. You can say this episode is released on this date and it goes to all of your listeners. Here's the cool part. In a private podcast with Hello Audio, you're now able to tailor that delivery. So as an example, if this is an evergreen challenge, right? This is something, maybe you put together a 30-day meditation challenge, right? And it's evergreen. My day one, if I join today, is going to be different than Lindsay's day one if she joins next week. So you can actually drip the content on a specific schedule for a specific listener, because that delivery is going to be tied to when I activated and loaded your feed or when I joined and bought your program. So now you can have day one, it's dripped content, your ability to drip out this content on a schedule per listener. That's huge if you wanted to run challenges or workshops. The other thing about challenges and workshops, the magic of why it works on the marketing side is that they end, right? There's urgency. It's just
go away.
I know, surprise, as if I knew that's a surprise for anyone. It is because they go away. With private podcasts, you can put that expiration date. You can have something that we refer to a lot as a pop-up podcast, right? So, hey, binge all the content. In challenges, if you're running challenges live, you're not going to have the same show up rate day after day. It just kind of drops off, and that's just normal. People's schedules are busy. It's hard to block off that time, especially if your people are actually doing stuff and they have jobs and lives and all the things. Everyone's busy. But now if you're able to put that in an audio, in a private podcast, they're able to binge that content at their convenience, and they have a sense of urgency to get it done because it's going to go away. And not only is it, you can expire it for everyone at the same time. Sure. This also works for evergreen. You can expire it based on the date that they join. So I can only maybe have access to that private podcast for 30 days, starting on my day one. Same thing with Lindsay. So it's now all of a sudden, hopefully this is getting your wheels turning about all the different ways you can use it, whether it's a challenge, a workshop, a boot camp, a live event, all the things that you can use it for, how you put it together and deliver and maybe even expire access and take away access. It just opens up so many more possibilities other than the subscription, pay $5 a month, and then you're stuck continuing to create content week after week after week after week.
Yes. But even if you did do that membership, which I think is the next one, course or membership content. So this is actually the original reason why I created Hello Audio. It used to be called Podcast Your Course. Because I literally was like, why can't I just listen to courses? So even if you have membership content, which means you do create something monthly, what we do at Hello Audio that is very different than a typical premium podcast monthly subscription is we actually do something called membership feeds, where if I join in January and you don't want them to have access to anything prior because they didn't pay for it, if you want to, there's lots of different ways you can structure your membership. That's not the only way, but you can keep it on the same feed and I come in January. I can't see anything else. But Nora came in December. She actually has December and January. So we've thought of all of it. And that's because we came from a content creation perspective and not necessarily a podcast perspective. So our membership content is even relatively unique compared to what's out there. But here it is. Number 4, offer a course, right? Or create some level of educational experience where you are promising some sort of result. People are coming to your podcast to learn something. And maybe some of you are thinking like, oh, well, my podcast is like a drama series and I don't teach anything. There still might be something there. And I want to encourage you to just let that go for a little bit. Like, yes, there's people who teach people how to podcast. And you're like, oh, this is for them. That's why they're successful at monetizing. People will pay money for all sorts of types of stuff. Maybe you can teach them how you come up with the things for your show. Maybe you can teach them story writing. I mean, there's a lot. And so I think I just want you to be thinking about the paid piece of like, can I teach them something? Do I have something to share or pass on? And would a percentage of my audience care about that? And for sure, there's a whole bunch of people that never want to write a story and they won't buy it. But for that fraction of people who are listening to your drama series, like maybe there is, right? And I think that just like really allowing that to be a possibility for you is huge. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add here. This is why courses are important, and they're very different for Hello Audio. With a typical private podcast company, they're charging you per listener and per member, and they charge you that like per month if they don't allow an open cart of purchasing. We believe that you can charge $1,000 for a piece of audio. It doesn't matter. So obviously with a membership, it's monthly indefinitely, but then you can charge annual plans. You can decide to just like maybe make it a one-off and they get access forever. It's up to you. And the point here is like, we are really creator first at Hello Audio, and we want people to be able to charge and like set up their businesses that work for them. And that's really key. Cool. This is our last one.
Sort of.
Nope. Whoop. I went backwards. Sort of. Oh, this is the fun one. You kind of brought this up. Yeah. I made this it's very specific. So some of you are like, I'm not a coach. And it's like, that's cool. Okay. Like this isn't necessarily for just being a coach, but I couldn't think of another way to frame this one. It can be a coach in your pocket. It could be it could be meditations. It's a daily affirmation. There's another creator who uses Hello Audio that I think it's called Rebel something. She just is like, wake up, listen to my audio for 2 or 3 minutes a day. And it's just like motivation. So like motivation. And so it's called Coach in Your Pocket, but it was more like the framework of it. This idea that they listen to you for a certain reason every single week or biweekly or whatever. And what if you took that a step further and like think about like boil it down, like what's the real reason why they're listening? For some folks, it's motivation. For some, it's like random facts. Others, it's entertainment. Like how can you turn that into like maybe something that you can drip either indefinitely, again, like every day until the end of time, or like a coach in your pocket for 2 weeks, right? I'm going to take you from point A to point B in this length of time. And like Nora said, drip it, right? Where you can go through this like experience. So clearly this works really well in health. This works well in coaching. I'm trying to think if I can think of like other ways.
We have running coaches. We have folks that help people with their form and so they're kind of, and you're not going to watch a video necessarily. You're going to be running, right? When you do it, we have folks that help folks with their horses. We have horse trainers. So when you're out there with the horse, they're kind of in your ear and they're able to guide you through something. There's a lot of we have launches, marketing coaches that help people with their launches. And so they have their framework set up. And on day 1, this happens, day 2. And we all know there's mindset crap that happens when you're kind of going through that. So this is a great opportunity for you to be in their ears and kind of coaching them through that framework. And you kind of know what they're experiencing day after day. So those are just some real examples of how some of our members are using this.
Yeah. And I think the way you want to think about this here, we have users charging hundreds of dollars for access to this. And they're only like 50. I think it's specifically thinking of Andrea Crowder, who teaches.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a launch. I can't remember what she calls it, but it is around launch coaching. And it's like $500, something like that now. And it's only 15 minutes of audio a day for like 2 weeks straight during a launch. I think there's supplemental materials like workbooks and stuff like that. But the idea is the folks were like, oh my gosh, it's as if you were coaching me live while I did this process. And so when I you might look at this and be like, oh, someone's only going to pay $5. Sure, maybe. But Nora and I can tell you with being in digital marketing and digital content creation for a long time, the value really comes from like, what is the result you can get them? And like, why would they pay X dollars to get that result? They've struggled before. They know that it costs them money in the long run. So $500, you might be like, man, that's a lot of money for audios. But the reality is if they go through a launch very level-headed and they get better results than the last time they did that launch, that $500 is a drop in the bucket. And they likely have access in perpetuity or like launches all forward. So just wanting to bring up that idea of like, yeah, maybe someone charges $27 for this, but it really can be depending on the promise you make for your audience, the niche that you're in. There's lots of different price points. I added a bonus.
It's hard not to. It's just there's so many use cases.
Yeah. Why don't you take this one?
Oh, emails. Oh my goodness. So I'll give you a real world example. We have one of our amazing members writes great emails. And like all of us, as we're trying to communicate to our list, sometimes they don't get opened, right? And the inbox is crowded, just like.
Or you're like us podcasters where you'd rather talk about it instead of write it. Because that's
truth. Yeah, that's very true. And it is easier to write than sometimes it is, or speak rather than write, right? But one of the things that she did was she just speaks her emails. Right. And so she created a private podcast, which is, Tarzan reads her emails. I think that's the title of the private podcast. And it gives her audience an alternative way to consume her email content. Right. And what an amazing way. How many of us, I know for me, I can speak personally for myself. I won't speak for you, Lindsay, but there's definitely folks I'm on their email list. And I would much rather listen to those emails than to sit and remember to read them, especially as the inbox gets more and more crowded. So if you think about these private podcasts can be a new inbox and a new way of reaching your ideal customer. This is a really big one. This expand. I don't know if we have all the other things on this slide email content, it's so hard not to, like blogs. Exactly. I mean, if you think of, if you're a blogger and you love to write or you're turning things, why wouldn't you just speak, right? That and give people another opportunity to consume your amazing content. Discovery calls. So I can say as a former consultant, right, in doing a lot of discovery calls with folks, that's just a great way because at least, Hello Audio, you can have a private podcast for one person. It can be tied to that specific person because you get to control that. So if you have a client, especially a high-end client, you can put that discovery call in there and they can, how many coaching calls have we ever had that we were like, oh, that was some gold, and we never went back and re-listened to that, to the replay. So discovery calls, motivational content. We talked about worksheet walkthroughs. That's huge if you want to do guided, kind of a guided instruction for a workbook or a worksheet. Daily affirmations, right? If you think, I know I got my teenage daughter a calendar. Granted, it's like a sarcastic comment every day, one of those daily calendars, but she loves it. And to have someone, an entertainer or someone funny, a comedian, a joke a day, I know something my son would really like too. That is possible. People would pay for that. You think I'm crazy? People would pay for that. They pay for the calendars.
I want to point out too, someone might be like, well, why wouldn't you just put this public? Something like that. Obviously a private discovery call, you wouldn't. Blogs, you could put public. But like I said, I think this idea that you can like take it a step further and get an email address, that's key. And you all know that just because it's public doesn't mean everyone's going to find it. That's actually not the case. And so you can treat private podcasts as if they're public and make the link, what we call at Hello Audio, universal, which means we don't track the email address, but Nora and I love the data. And if we know who's listening and how much they're listening and maybe like how really engaged they are, there's stuff you can do with that information that a public podcast can never. It doesn't matter that they're listening on an iPhone. Like, I love that we think that our data is so deep because we know where they're listening. No, it's not that deep. Like, what we really want is like the person. That's like when it gets really which you can do stuff with it. And that is where we go a lot further. So yes, we threw a bunch on this slide just because I can't not share like how our users are using it, because there's so many for sure. I forget what's
so
next.
Many.
Oh, okay. So now that we've kind of like convinced you, so I've flipped this. Like usually we have to teach this, like we teach about content on the front end to our creators. But when I'm talking to podcasters, you guys get the audio piece. But what I want you to see here is why audio for other types of content, not just a show to produce, is powerful. So you don't have to log into Kajabi or Patreon to like watch the thing or read it, right? You don't have to be looking at your screen as you walk the dog and all the things. So you can now be growing as a person, helping your listener expand, right? This is why we podcast, because we know we're helping people in some capacity, right? Whether it's laughing or like, learning something. So the idea that podcasting is audio as a type of content that's more than just podcasts. That's what I want you to walk away from. And so no videos, right? You don't actually have to put your earrings on and do your hair. Like Nora's like, Lindsay actually did her hair today. I usually have it up. We had to get ready for this. This is why a lot of us get into podcasting, is because it's so easy to create and it feels very intimate. And you don't have to create slides. Look at all this time that we spent on these slides. So when you think about creating that like educational content, I want podcasters to realize that they're already doing the thing that people want them to be doing. Let's just think about the different ways that we can use this medium that we all know and love to grow our businesses, to make money online, all the things. And so here's where my graph that I typically show at the beginning, but I flipped it. The perceived value and to how usable it is why people really like audio as a format. And so on this list are things like if you've gotten into how to grow your online business off your podcast, you'll see there's ebooks, there's email sequences, there's quizzes, there's videos, there's calls you can do. I mean, all of it. And there's levels of value that your listeners and your subscribers are looking at as they decide what to like basically take with them. And so for us, audio is super usable because it's accessible and portable and it's easy to access. And so the value goes up. So people are more likely to give their email address. Not a lot of people want that ebook. They just don't. And that's where we're at right now. And so by you stepping forward and offering audio versions of stuff, this is going to grow your list faster than your maybe not even competition. We're in competition with ourselves, really. But it's going to make you grow your list faster and have connection with your audience and be able to serve them in the way that you want to. I keep forgetting. So yeah, think about it from this perspective. It's not your show, it's your content. The other things that you do around your show, what if they could be in audio form? Whoops. I was going to show an example of one of our users, Jacqueline Malone. She actually teaches people podcasting. So she has a system, and she teaches podcasting to the creator economy market, to digital creators, people who have courses, are experts in their own right. And she offers a podcast version of that content, and people love it. So there are people out there teaching. They are podcasters typically, and their users are getting, their subscribers are getting a lot of value out of it. Nora, do you want to talk a little bit about the tools that you need? This is like probably like, I don't know, basic stuff for like podcasters, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to do this.
Yeah, I mean, for all of you, you already have your mic set up, so I don't need to tell you what mics to use. Typically, we have to teach folks which mic to use because they're not podcasters and they've never recorded audio, or they're folks that have wanted to create a course or a coaching program and they've kicked the can down the road because of the video piece and they've procrastinated. And so they're like, oh my goodness, I just can do audio? Yes, you can just literally have rapid content creation with audio. So you probably don't need advice on the mic. Those are typically the two that we would recommend for kind of beginners. We love Descript for editing. I know, and all of you probably have a different editing tool that you really like. It's one of our favorites. We don't get paid for saying that. We just really love how easy it is. And for folks that are creating content for the first time, it's super, super easy for them to do and much easier than video editing because of all the things, right? Where were you? Were you in this frame? What were you wearing? What was the lighting? All of it. So it's just so much easier. And then, obviously we're a little bit biased as co-founders of Hello Audio, that we love Hello Audio to distribute for all the right reasons. And it's because of how we do things differently. We do allow you to control how content gets delivered to each individual listener. And we'll kind of talk about that here, I think, in a little bit when we go over some of the features of Hello Audio, just why it's different from other platforms you might have seen if you're interested, if you have questions on it. But really, it allows you to be very specific per listener. So if I sent my private podcast to Lindsay and she listened with her specific email address, I can see which episode she listened to specifically. I know if she's a hot lead because she's interested in a specific topic. I know now that I can take actions. I can tag her with maybe a specific tag if she listened to a certain topic in that feed that I gave her access to, right? So now all of a sudden we're getting into personalized podcasting, not just private, but personalized. And that just takes things to an entirely different level. But I mean, I don't need to tell you, podcasting is not rocket science. And the tools that you need to be able to really distribute it are really very simple.
Yep. And one gift that we have for you, if you want some help coming up with your own audio assets, we have an audio asset challenge that's available for you to listen, to binge. I think it's 8 episodes, and we'll help you literally walk through. So today was giving you ideas of what can be turned. That's a little more step by step. Here's how you can launch it. Here's how you think through the lesson, what belongs in each episode. So because of my teaching background, we do offer that inside of the Audio Asset Challenge. So you can go to challenge.helloaudio.fm and go through that journey totally for free. And hopefully you can get your first audio asset up. I love this, the language of audio asset. Remember, it's not just your podcast. You're actually creating a piece of audio content that you can use to help your listeners. And then we have one other feed that I think is really powerful for folks on this presentation, is our success stories feed. So if you go to go.helloaudio.fm/success, that should direct you to a landing page that kind of gives you a little bit more of a description. But really what we're looking at is there are people just like you, our users. There's about 50 episodes that you can listen to. You can look, you don't have to listen to all of it, but you can look through and say, oh, I kind of want to learn how to do X. And there's a real Hello Audio user talking about how they created that product and how their audience is receiving that product. So they're increasing engagement, they're boosting their conversions like Nora talked about, and they're creating stronger connections with their super fans. For those of you who have read Pat Flynn's amazing book, those folks that love you and wish you had more stuff, you're doing them a disservice by not offering them potentially more with you. And you can do that potentially with private podcasting and stick in the realm that you know and love, the audio realm. That's what we want for you. I think that might be it. I don't know if we're actually going to go through an official Q&A. So we know this is being streamed places. So if you tag Nora and I and you have questions at any point throughout this presentation, we will be there answering those questions. So please leave them. That's important for us. And Nora did promise also a slide of some of the features with Hello Audio. Oh, that's funny. I forgot to no listener per listener. It slid in like that. We often get asked well, how are you different than Libsyn or Transistor or Supercast, or just go down the list of everyone who has a private podcast. And these are the reasons. And we probably aren't going to go through every single thing. We've alluded to a lot of it in our conversation. The one that I think we need to go over is actions, Nora, audio inbox, and we talked about no listener pricing. Yeah. So why don't we talk about actions and audio inbox?
Yes. So actions are really triggers, right? So listener behavior that triggers an action. So as I mentioned before, if you're giving, your private podcast to someone and they listen to a specific episode, you can take an action based on that listener behavior. So what might that action be? It might be tagging them in your CRM, maybe use ActiveCampaign, maybe use something else. Maybe now you podcasted your webinar content or your sales page, you spoke your sales page and you threw that in an episode, they listened to it. Their awareness level as a prospect, if you're trying to monetize, is higher than someone who didn't. So you might want to tag them, and then you can follow up in an email sequence, or maybe your sales team can reach out, or there's a lot of different workflows, but now you're able to take that action.
Yeah. And you could even add them to a new feed, right?
Yes.
So you could do like cool secret unlock stuff. So they listen to this episode, they get added to this other thing. Oh, did you know that I had this special feed for you? We're actually seeing people create like choose your own adventure with this kind of thing. So then people can like listen, pick episode 20 or 2021 if you want Sally to go into the tunnel, and like, and so whatever they listen to can give them another episode actually. So we actually have it's also tied to episode release, which is kind of crazy. So not everyone gets the same experience, which is related to dynamic content insertion, which is many of you guys know about it. Typically, it's talked about with ads at Hello Audio. Yes, ads are great, and you could totally use it for ad spots. You can use it to insert your music in the front, so you don't have to do it in editing. But what we like is we tie it to segmenting and tagging listeners inside Hello Audio. And so that's where actions can also help. So if someone does something, they can then actually hear a different pre-roll than someone else who took a different action. So you're probably sitting here being like, this is ninja. And it is a lot. We also want you to know that it can be very easy, like we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. But, we created this as marketers and content creators ourselves. And so we're doing all the cool things that you can do typically with our like CRM software and landing pages. Audio inbox, this is dope.
Oh, yeah. So talk about a time saver. So, I mean, we do allow bulk upload of your video, and we strip the audio for you. So you don't have to go to the janky sites and like get your audio for you. So that's good if you do have video content. But what makes this even more special is if you do happen to be running videos, all you need to do is throw them in a Google Drive. So right now we have Google Drive, and that is the first one that we kind of started with. The next is Zoom. So if you're on a Zoom call, if you're coaching, or if you have a group call or whatever it is, and that just kind of goes and is in your account. When you log into Hello Audio, all of those things, whether it's your Google Drive or Zoom, and there's going to be other ones coming soon, will already be there for you. So you don't have to worry about downloading the video and then uploading it to Hello Audio and remembering to do that. It's when you log into Hello Audio, when you're connecting your Zoom or your Google Drive, it'll all be there for you, which is really big. Yeah.
We're all about saving time and workflow because we're all busy, right?
Yes.
It's hard running a business. So that's kind of like the things that make us stand out from typical podcast hosting companies. And we do also offer private public feeds. So we've had people as well. Side note, we do public feeds as well and have import buttons and stuff, all of that as well. But our bread and butter clearly is private podcasting, the thing we're obsessed with. So yes, I think that does it for us. I can leave up the thank you page. We do have a Facebook group, which you do not have to be a user or a paid subscriber or anything to be in that group. So that's also a place where a lot of marketers are talking about how they're using the product. They're all experimenting. And so it's a great kind of public open access place for you to come and ask questions and to see how other people are using it. Cause I think that's always huge when we try new stuff. We want to know that we're not the only crazy ones. We're like, does this actually work? Or like, what results are you getting? So that's typically how the Facebook group is run. So yeah, that's just Facebook groups, Hello Audio. There's also a shortcut. If you go to helloaudio.community, that should redirect you to the Facebook group as well.
Okay, we have a couple of questions.
Hey, Jared. Great.
Hello. Great job.
Thanks.
All right, let's start with a question here from Lisa. And you may have touched on these, so you can just kind of share your
always down to reiterate the
teacher. Never a bad thing. All right, This is Lisa. Lisa, would you edit a private podcast?
Oh, good question. I actually got asked this by an investor the other day. Okay, so there's a mix here. The cool thing about private podcasting that I think is different than public is like public has to be really polished because you have them for a second. If your mic sounds terrible, they're like, I'm out, because they have something else they can listen to, right? So when it comes to private podcasts, you again have somebody opting in and saying, please more. And a lot of times we have people do very raw stuff. Like I think Laura is who I'm thinking of. Laura Husson has a podcast where she just on her walks with her dog, you can hear nature in the background. She's just like talking about what she's thinking and processing that day on her dog walk, and her people ate it up. And so that raw piece, it's kind of like with TikTok, right? Like you don't want to be too overproduced. It's like we actually want to see real people and hear real people. Now your audio can't be so horrific that like your ears are bleeding at the end of it, but like the rawness of, you know, you don't have to have intro, outro. You don't have to make it super, you know, like organized and whatever. It can be a little just off the cuff. Jessica Stansberry is another creator who has a public podcast, and she has a private one. And that's where she puts like things that that just doesn't end up in the show because it seems a little too like whatever, unpolished. So I think that's a great question. I'm trying to think if you had any other question or
Yeah, I
thoughts
think
on that, Nora.
most of our users tend to be more concerned about audio quality and versus editing content. So so one of the things we did is we integrated with Dolby.io. So that right in the app itself, you can just remaster a track. So you don't have to like worry about making, you know, reducing noise or anything like that. That was the one thing that came up with our users. They weren't really editing the content, but they were remastering the audio to make it sound better.
Yeah. We just don't want it to stop you from creating the content. We want it to feel easy, and your listeners probably are cool with that being, depending on what the feed's for.
Okay. Next up, we have from Isabel. What platforms do you recommend for the personalized content drip?
I think we're the only ones that do it. Yeah. As of right now, I'm expecting that not to last forever, but Hello Audio is the platform that does the personalized content drip, and the drip tied to segmentation and actions that people are taking. So I like to say that we're kind of like the MailChimp of audio. ConvertKit is another one that I know a lot of creators use. It's where you have, you can kind of segment and sort folks based on what stuff they're engaging with. You can do that with Hello Audio. We look at that and say, yep, we can create that same experience. We also have, it's not released yet, but it's coming. We've been in private testing. We have something called the Super Listener Score, which is like lead scoring. So what lead scoring looks like in a CRM, like ActiveCampaign, is like, oh, this person opens all your emails and like does it really quickly and is subscribed to this many lists. So we're basically creating a super listener score where it's like Isabel listens to 4 feeds. She listens to 95% of the episodes that land on those feeds. And now you actually know, man, Isabel has a 97 score. She's really high. Yes, you could sell her something, or you could just reach out and be like, I'm so glad you're liking my content. Is there anything else you want from me? You basically now have access to that information.
Yeah. Oh, and don't forget the personalized. One of the things that everyone
we
loves.
Even talk about that feature.
I know our from an Hello Audio standpoint. You know how like most CRMs like ActiveCampaign and MailChimp, they allow you to personalize the first name with like a hi first name, right? And it inserts your listener's first name. We can do that in episode titles. So how cool is it if you sent someone, whether it's an investor, whether it is an amazing client, whether it's someone you want to partner with, a potential JV, right? And now all of a sudden, or a potential sponsor, whatever that is, now they see their name in the episode title. That's
and
one
you didn't have to do anything extra.
You didn't do anything. Like, that's really cool too.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question from Brian. In attracting an engaged audience, should my marketing strategies be directing new listeners to a private podcast feed? Since I've listed other podcast apps, my email capture percentage has plummeted.
Ooh, this might be a Nora question. What do you think, Nora?
Ooh, interesting. So I love private podcasts for email capture, period. Like that to me is the one of the biggest and underused now. I don't think it'll be underused forever. Strategies, because you're sending them to one place to get your private feed, and then it's a no-brainer because you've now opened that communication channel with them in that private podcast. So as far as what that content is, I want to talk to you so we could brainstorm what that potential private podcast is that is in alignment with your public show. right?
Yeah.
I don't think you don't have to change anything in how you're doing your public show. I still want, use that as a way to attract new people and get people interested and have them know what you're all about. And then allow the private feed, as Lindsay, which you talked about earlier, allowing them to take that one step further. So allow them to raise their hand and say, I got to know you on your public feed. Now I want to go further with you. I want to learn from you. I want to be entertained by you in a new way. I want a new channel. That's where the private feed comes in.
Yeah.
So
And I'm
important.
curious what you were using before as email capture. So was it an ebook? Was it a training? Or were you just like, hey, subscribe to my newsletter? Because that also matters. And I think we did talk about that in the talk today. It's like audio conversion is higher because they're already listening to you. So they're like, of course I want to keep listening. I don't want to watch a video, or I don't want to go into my inbox. Yeah. Or I don't want to read stuff. And so we do see a jump because we're staying in the same medium. They're like, oh, great. This is exactly where I think you should be. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. And we're happy to talk more specifics with you too, from a business standpoint, marketing standpoint.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for the Q&A. We have your email, support@helloaudio.fm.
Yes.
And of course, we hope that everyone will check that out and reach out to you both. Thank you for sharing.
That would be great. Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, we had a good time, and look forward to chatting with you again soon. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Awesome. Take care.